Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Ann Arbor, Michigan. Whether you are seated here in person or joining us from a cozy living room, watching our live stream, or catching the service on demand, thank you for honoring us with your time and presence. My name is Stella Anderson, and I serve this congregation as the Acting Director of Spiritual Growth and Development. It's amazing to think that this community has been coming together week after week for over 150 years, even in the midst of a global pandemic. Such resilience and dedication inspires me every day to provide a safe, nurturing haven for our children and youth, so they are free to bring their true selves, build meaningful relationships, and explore the big questions. I am joined for our much-loved question box service by the Reverend Manish Mishra-Marzetti, our senior minister, and the Reverend Cassandra Hartley, our executive minister. With us also is Allison, our Pianist-in-Residence, and Mike Halerz, our technology consultant. On many Sundays, you can find me in the SGD wing, helping families navigate the computer kiosks and directing youth to the right classrooms. But thanks to our dedicated volunteers, I have the opportunity to welcome you here this morning. Whether you're a newcomer, a long-timer, or somewhere in between, I hope you come away from today's service with a sense of belonging and community. If you are new and want to learn more about us, please join us after the service for a newcomer welcome in the Jackson Chapel, which is just out these double doors on the right-hand side past the social hall. This is a wonderful chance to meet other congregants and staff, ask questions, and make connections. Gathering together on these cold, snowy mornings is such a source of comfort and joy for so many. On this fifth and last Sunday of January, our Sunday Fun Day crew is hosting an all-ages, winter-themed celebration immediately after the second service at 12:30. Grab some cocoa and snow-inspired treats in the courtyard outside the social hall, make a nightlight at the craft table, try your hand at a snow-inspired game, and snap a photo at our photo op booth. Won't you please join us? I also wanted to remind you that next Sunday, February 6th, the UUAA will host the second of 3 gathering tables. This time, we turn our attention to the work of anti-racism and anti-oppression. There are currently 15 congregational groups actively working on this Vision 2050 priority area. Please join us from 2:30 to 4 on Zoom as we chart our collective path towards a welcoming, inclusive future for everyone. You can find more information and a link to register in advance on our website, uuaa.org. Thank you for bringing your energy and creativity to this urgent work. Before we move more deeply into service, I have one additional item. One of our childcare renters recently returned to their own space, and now the Potter Nursery and especially the Harper Room, our YRUU space, need to be rebuilt. We're hoping that the congregation can help. We need gently used furniture, throw blankets, fairy lights, pride flags, bookshelves, maybe some books for a little lending library, floor pillows, perhaps a small Bluetooth speaker. Before bringing any of these items to the building, we're asking you to fill out a short Google form and upload pictures of the items so that YRUU can choose which pieces are the best fit for their vision. The full list and the Google form link can be found in the weekly SGD bulletin, and you can also ask me directly for more information. We deeply appreciate any and all donations. A few weeks ago, as I kissed my children goodbye and told them I would see them when they arrived for SGD classes, my 6-year-old Nathan asked, "Why do we go to church?" This is not the first time he or his sisters have asked this question, and I'm quite certain it won't be the last time. I offered my usual response, that we go to church to learn about how to be the best people we can be, to explore ideas like peace and justice, to connect to the sacred, to build relationships, to learn about the past, and strive for a better future. Those are all worthy reasons, but none of them felt quite right. And clearly he agreed because he said, "But Mom, we can do all that anywhere." That made me stop in my tracks. I muttered something about how we'd continue this conversation later and hopped in my car and drove here, his words running through my mind on a loop. Spoiler alert, I'm still working on a satisfactory answer. Perhaps we are drawn together in this sacred space not to find the answers to the big questions, but rather to be in community with other seekers. As UU religious educator Connie Goodbread affirms, faith development is all we do. Unitarian Universalism is the faith we teach. The congregation is the curriculum. What better lesson for our children and youth than to witness a worship service that celebrates curiosity and free inquiry, a service that celebrates not knowing. Why do I bring my children here? So that they never stop asking questions. I invite us to embrace the beauty of not knowing as we move more deeply into our shared time together today.
Good morning. So I have a brief set of information or announcements to continue kind of the setting of our time together here today. And on a Sunday in which we're honoring the questions that we might be holding, I'm going to introduce two and then I'm going to speak to them. Reverend Manish, what is a general announcement about a case of COVID in a community? And Reverend Manish, what's a close contact announcement about a case of COVID in a community? By the way, those of you who are actively parenting or grandparenting, I'm not going to be saying anything you are not already well familiar with. I've learned since September we get these notices about 2 or 3 times a week related to our own kids and the communities that they're connected to. So let me start first with a reminder of what we are trying to do here in our UUAA community, which is mitigation of risk, which is not elimination of risk. So what that means is, if we choose to do anything outside of our personal spaces, our homes, go grocery shopping, attend an event in town, a music event, a play, socialize with people outside of our immediate household, anything along those lines involves risk. It's often a calculated risk. So what we do is we mitigate to try and ensure that the risk is as low as possible, but low risk does not mean zero risk. As such, and I guess we can take a certain amount of collective pride in this, we actually should. We're almost at 2 years into a pandemic, and we're having our first case, one case of somebody in our community having a COVID positive test and potentially having been on our grounds while they may have been positive. First off, that's astonishing when you also consider we're now on the down curve of Omicron locally, but it's highly transmissible. We're learning it stays on surfaces for long durations of time. I mean, to have gotten this far deep into the pandemic, and not just the pandemic, Omicron specifically, we're doing really well. I hope you'll hear the measure of effectiveness of the mitigation steps that we have had in place pretty consistently. So let me say a word, and those of you again who are parents or grandparents, this is going to be familiar. A general announcement, which if you got one from our community, that is a measure of transparency and trust building. So then, prior to today, when I have said we have had no reported cases of COVID-19 related to any UUA activities at all, including our children's programs or adult programs, we mean it. We're being honest about that. 0. Now it's one individual. And we're going to be transparent about that. So you got a general announcement. The general announcement means that if that's all you got, you're probably fine. You were not in any activity or program or indoor space with the individual who notified us that they tested positive. It is simply for transparency to let you know we had one case. Some of you, a small number of folks, will get a close contact notification. That does not necessarily mean you were seated right next to the person. It means you were maybe at an activity with a small group of individuals with somebody who reported that they tested positive. Now, in this case, let's be clear about holding also the context. The individual, this is not always true. If you're out at the grocery store, you have no idea if anybody nearby you is testing regularly for COVID-19 or not. In this case, the individual themselves tested negative the day that they were in our UUAA building and at an activity. What that means is that the viral load was so low, if it was present at all, that it didn't show up in the test. That also doesn't mean zero presence and zero transmissibility, but it does mean low likelihood of transmissibility if it was present, side by side with all the other mitigation factors that we have in place: universal masking, an HVAC system that has virus and bacteria filtration, et cetera, et cetera. So hold the information in context if you receive a close contact notification. Watch your health, which means about 5 days. See how you're doing. If you don't feel great for any reason, please take care of yourself, get checked out, get tested. And if you're feeling undue anxiety of any kind, please also get yourself tested, get the reassurance that may be helpful there. What I'd offer also, being one of the parents who routinely receives these kinds of notifications from our local schools, when the parents get it on email and the kids come home, and then I'll ask, so, do you know which classmate of yours was sick? It's that curiosity thing. Well, who is it? So I have to offer we're not going to do that. So if you ask me or anybody else in the leadership, we're just not doing that. We're not going to do that and engage in sharing that level of detail. Now, the person themselves, if they test positive, they can identify themselves to the community. The likely pathway for that might be that you see something in the pastoral news in the subsequent Thursday. Please note, the pastoral news is not for our collective curiosity. It's for us showing up as love and care when somebody's having a hard time. They're going through an illness. So in the same way, if any of you were sick and not feeling well, I would show up with love and care for you, as would all the other chancel folks that you see up here, as I hope you would if I was not feeling well. That's what we do. So if you find out that somebody in our community tested positive, we hold love and care for them. If you get a close contact notification, just watch your health and know that there were a lot of mitigation steps in place. You're probably okay, but watch your health. And also let us know. It's a very positive thing that an individual let us know that they tested positive, because it allows us to step into deeper community care. And we hope that anybody else who you're connected with an activity here, let us know. It's a good thing to do. It's a community-minded thing to do. And we'll continue doing what we're doing, which is, as needed, we will be transparent and send notices. And again, if you get a general notice, that's just for transparency. If you get a close contact notice, that's a different level of care. Just watch your own personal health if you get one of those. With these little announcement-style updates, I'm going to invite us to we'll continue moving deeper into this time together today, one in which we'll be holding our questions together.
Each week, we begin our time together by repeating the words of our chalice and covenant. Our chalice is a reminder that we are connected in so many ways. We're connected to one another here in this community. We're connected to Unitarian Universalists who are lighting chalices this morning all across the world. And we're connected to our living tradition. So please join me in saying the words of our chalice lighting together now. We light this chalice for the light of truth. We light this chalice for the warmth of love. We light this chalice for the energy of action. We light this chalice for the harmony of peace. Another way that we begin our time together each week is by repeating the words of our covenant. As Unitarian Universalists, we are not bound together by one single belief, but by the promises we make about how we will be together. So whether you have these words memorized or whether you're saying them for the first time, please join me as we say, "The spirit of this church is love. and service is its law. This is our covenant with each other, to dwell together in peace, to search for truth in love, and to help one another. Thank you.
This annual tradition of ours, which we call question box service, we've had to reinvent it a little bit for the multiple modalities of ways in which people engage with our community now, which include in person, as many are here this morning, and live streaming, viewing right now simultaneously from home and other locations, as well as those who'll view on demand later. And so some of that reconfiguration, which we'll continue making even better, we created a window of opportunity, especially for those who may view on demand or live streaming, over the prior 2 weeks via our e-communications, our community's e-communications, to submit questions in advance of today, and many chose to do that. If you're not signed up for our e-newsletters and e-communications, please do sign up. That's an important way to stay abreast of things like this. For those who are here in person today, you may have received a slip of paper and a pencil as you came in. Our youth group is with us today. We've got your questions. Thank you so much. And by the way, if you want to submit additional ones, you probably can. So don't be shy about that. And how I usually frame this is that think of something that's real for you. A real spiritual, emotional, social, ethical wondering, something that's live for you, that is on your heart, on your mind. We're not looking for paragraphs or even multiple sentences. Shorter is better. And if you can frame the thing you're wondering as a general, both specific to, meaningful to you, but in a general way that it could also be meaningful to others, that's all the more helpful. So that's the invitation, to think of something real, something that's live for you, something that would be meaningful to hear about. If you don't have a slip of paper or a pencil, just wave. The ushers are in the back. They will bring you more slips of paper or pencils as needed. And in just a moment, we will have some music, which will allow for some time to fill out questions. As the music is playing, just kind of look up and the ushers will come down the aisles and collect the questions by the end of that piece of music. If you're joining us live streaming at this moment, I'd invite you to go ahead. You could type, during that same time, you can type into the chat a question that's on your heart, something that you're holding dear and wondering about. We don't, at this moment, have a way to integrate the live stream questions into the service, but know that our chat host will take note of them and share them with us. So because time is always limited, we can't answer every question that is submitted, but please know that I personally read every question that we get for these services. And it is always very helpful to develop a broader sense of, here are the things that our community members are wondering about or struggling with or trying to figure out. It does influence topics we cover in future services. So with that, with a lot of love and gratitude, I thank you for your participation today, and we'll take a few minutes to think of our questions, and the ushers will then collect your submissions. We're first going to do a couple of questions from our kids who had a chance to submit questions in advance of today's service. Where does love come from? This is interesting. So we had a little bit of a variation on this question in the first service, but this is distinct and it's different. Oh, wow, that's a really good question. Okay, so first, the question in the first service was, what is love? And so my answer to that, I had to wind my way to it, but it was like warm, fuzzy energy that's very open-hearted, kind of expansive. It's a limitless energy. It's a relational energy. So where does that come from? You know, I work with spiritual teachers who believe very deeply that it's part of the fabric of the universe, of everything that we're connected to and a part of. I'm sitting with that deeply. That's like a newer teaching or message for me. So is it part of the fabric of the universe? There's a lot of things we could look at that point towards that, right? Other species other than us behave as if they're motivated by love, by affection, by caring. Elephants grieve deeply. They mourn. I mean, they deeply mourn the loss of elephants that are in their pod when they die. Even our household pets, they nuzzle us. I had a pet parrot once. I had no idea birds have feelings. Birds have feelings. I only learned that because I had a pet parrot. I wouldn't have known otherwise. That bird cared about me. It really did. I was surprised. I was like, oh my gosh, it's got this wide range of emotions. So yeah, I mean, there's evidence to that maybe love is an intrinsic part of the fabric of this reality that we're a part of. I'm still praying, reflecting, meditating, thinking very deeply on that. I don't have an answer to that. But I know people that I really look up to and learn from hold that love is intrinsic to the universe and the reality that we're a part of. That's about as good an answer. I guess you could take another one, which is that it's also a choice. Ooh, that's a good one, right? Love is a choice. Where does it come from? Our volition, our action, our choice. So we're over and over again, we're confronted with difficult situations in life. What are you going to do? How are you going to show up? Believe me, there's no shortage of reasons to show up as frustration and hostility. We see this in the day-to-day world. So what's another thing we can do? Choose love. Choose it over and over again. Keep choosing it over and over again. So one possibility, it's intrinsic to the fabric of reality. The other, it's a choice. It's a thing we choose to do over and over and over again. Good question. You got me thinking there. That's good. What's your favorite video game? All right, well, I turned 50 this year, so I grew up with Pong and, like the early days, the things that are now in museums, literally in museums. We took our children, there's a museum, it's called the Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. We took our kids there in the winter break. They dug up all the Atari cartridges from the 80s out of the dirt, out of landfills, and they're now museum pieces at the Museum of Play in Rochester. So from my era of video games, which is practically prehistoric, there was a game called Dig Dug. Only you Gen Xers are going to know what I'm talking about. And Joust, Burger Time. Only Gen Xers are going to know what I'm talking about. Anyway, anybody young, you think Grandpa's on a go now. He's just going to keep talking about the video games that nobody knows anything about anymore. So thank you to the little ones for some good questions. We've got our youth group with us today. I want to get to some of the youth group questions. Do you believe in anything godlike? So the emphasis there is godlike, and it's lowercase, G-O-D-like. So how I interpret that is like, godlike can be energy, it can be essence, just as we were talking about, like maybe is love an intrinsic energy, an intrinsic part of the fabric of the universe? Maybe. And if it was, we could call that lowercase g God. Or something really important. See, we use language as code language. It's shorthand, right? So when we lowercase g God, something really important. Something that really matters. That maybe motivates, inspires us. That's an ultimate part of reality, right? Why not love? It seems to be. I'm really thinking very deeply about that. But there are other things too. What else could... I think, even aside... I used to say, and this is also still in evolution, that just energy itself seems to be a part of the fabric of reality. What is that energy? I mean, for me, emotional energy is very palpable. I can feel it. It's a very real physical thing for me. But we know from science, E equals mc squared, right? So energy is always around us. It's never not in existence. It changes forms. We know that there's dark matter and dark energy that we don't even understand. There's forms of energy we don't understand yet. We can only indirectly measure. So, I think there's a lot of ways to understand this small g God as opposed to the big G theistic God of some traditions. And it could be love. It could be energy or essence. An impulse. There's a lot of ways to understand that. Now you specifically asked, do I? Yeah, probably. Sure. I believe energy exists. I believe love exists. And those are really important, all-permeating concepts. So sure, I believe in something that's a lowercase g, godlike. Yeah, these are really good questions. I'm puzzling them out with you in real time. Isn't that great? Okay. What can one do to stop the police from killing people of color? Thank you. Thank you for that. I've had my own journey in our nation in understanding how our social structures relate to people who are obviously not visibly identifiable as white. And it's an interesting thing because white culture writ large does not treat me, being Indian American, as BIPOC, meaning Black, Indigenous, as a person of color. It's often assumed I'm treated culturally as if I'm not, actually. And yet my experiences in the culture are not that of being somebody who's visibly identified as white. So I've got these two things that happen simultaneously. I'm invisibilized by the culture. Oh, you don't count. Your identity's practically white. But practically doesn't mean white. And yet I live with cultural realities that make it absolutely clear that I'm not. And one of my experiences, I was early in my career, ministry career, I was living in Connecticut. I had a fancy Mustang those days. I was a cool minister once upon a time, before becoming a dad. So I was driving my Mustang a little too fast, and I got pulled over. I deserved to be pulled over. And the cop wrote a ticket. And then checked on the ticket, they have things like, they track pullovers because they track racial data. They have to report it for equality and discrimination purposes. Who are they pulling over and how often are they pulling over particular categories of people? He checked off that I'm white. I told it, and you have to sign receipt of the ticket. I said, I'm not signing that, I'm not white. He said he was going to take me to jail if I would not sign the ticket that said I was white. I'm not joking. He was going to arrest me for and he's the one who put inaccurate information on the ticket to cover up his pullover stats. So I wrote to the Connecticut Department, they had a Commission on Human Rights. I wrote to the Connecticut Department of the Commission on Human Rights to say, your police department is covering up its racial profiling stats. And they wrote back and said, there's nothing we can do. We have no say over what individual police officers do on the road in the course of their day-to-day duties. We hear a lot of this. Passing on of accountability. Well, there's nothing we can do. Yes, we're a state agency, state government, but we don't dictate what law enforcement does on the street. Passing on of the buck. That just keeps everything rolling as it is with nothing ever changing. So here's a practical thing. Here's something we can do right here. And we have some folks engaged in this work right here in our community. You should learn about it. Engage in it, please. I ask you to. So Washtenaw County has a 5-year budgeting cycle. Its next 5, once it's set, it's set. It doesn't change for 5 years. Something like 60 to 70% of that budget is policing. It's the sheriff's department. Our county sheriff has said he'd happily have less money so that instead of it going to law enforcement, it can go to social supports to make the communities stronger and in less need of police enforcement actions. But guess what? Policing is an industry with vested commercial interests. So it takes the people having to say, we want a different budget. What can we do? Here's one thing we can do right now. Show up in the Washtenaw County budgeting cycle, say you want less money for law enforcement, more money for social support and social infrastructure, which is actually what we need in our county, and let's make it happen. They don't hear enough from us, the commissioners who engage in this process. If they do, if they hear from us what we want, what our people actually need, they have to follow. They will follow. We can trust that. But we have to engage. So there's one practical thing we can do. Thank you. A very good question. You see, you brought up a lot of sadness in me at first. I was like, yeah. But then look at the fire. There is stuff we can do. And there are people engaging this. So let me give you the organizations. ICPJ, the Interfaith, local, I'm blanking on the short acronym, what it stands for. But we partner with them, our local interfaith partner, and they are taking lead in trying to change the Washtenaw County budget. We should make a difference in that. I'm going to take one more from our youth, because you all are here. What led you to personally be a UU? Great question. Yeah, I grew up Hindu, so super conservative Hindu. Yeah, it was expected that I would have an arranged marriage, even though I was born and raised here. And I'm gay, so that a heterosexual arranged marriage was not going to work. So I figured that all out by my early 20s, and then I felt stuck. What do I do? So most of my 20s, I did this, I'm spiritual but not religious. I'm going to do my own thing. And then I got to my mid to late 20s, and I was like, but wait, I had community. I grew up with community. We went to temple all the time, and everybody knew each other. It was a community for my family, and it's one that I grew up in. And I realized I kind of, what do we say? You say we threw the baby out with the bathwater. It's a horrible image, but literally I got rid of something really good and trying to solve a problem is what I did. And so I was in my mid to late 20s. I'm living in Washington, D.C., and I thought, what's possible? Are there religious or spiritual communities where I don't want to convert? I will never not be culturally Hindu. I am culturally Hindu. So I wasn't going to convert and swear that I've left everything in my life behind. And a friend suggested Unitarian Universalism, and I went there I was 27 or 28 when I found Unitarian Universalism, something like that, about 27, I think. And been here since then, and it's been a good journey. Thank you, youth groups, for some beautiful questions. Thank you to our kids for some great questions. Our hope is to, the way we send around Time for All Ages segments, video clips, we're hoping to put that together for this so that kids and youth who couldn't be here in person today, you'll get a chance to hear some of these answers as well. Special thanks to you all. Thank you.
On January 1st of this year, we lost someone who was very beloved to our community, the social justice leader, Jim Toy. Jim Toy was likely the first publicly out man in Michigan, and he established the first campus center in history devoted to the support of sexual minority group members. For over 40 years, he worked tirelessly for LGBTQAI rights through his public speaking, teaching, organizing, writing, and protesting. His loss is deeply felt here because we have collaborated with him many times over the years, and I know many of us knew him and worked with him as well. Today we have an opportunity to honor his legacy and continue on his work by supporting the Jim Toy Community Center. The vision of the center is to be a resource that exists to provide information, education, social events, and advocacy by and for the queer and ally community in the Washtenaw County area. And that is exactly what it does, offering everything from support groups to gay business networking to book clubs to legal advocacy and support. It's powerful to see how one person's commitment has changed so many lives, how his love continues to ripple out through all those that he touched. But every one of us has that same power to make a difference. So let us put our own love and commitment into action by giving as generously as we can today. If you'd like to make an offering, you can text 73256 to UUAA and select the Jim Toy Center Fund when you see the drop-down box for funds. You can also give at uuaa.org/giving, and of course you can also drop cash and checks at in the baskets as you leave. However you give, thank you so much for your generosity and for supporting the Jim Toy Community Center. Thank you. I invite you to rise now in body or in spirit. And please join me as we say the words of dedication to dedicate our offerings today. To the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives, and these are offerings. Thank you.
turn now to the questions from our adult members of our community. Deciphering handwriting is real. Why are religions important? Yeah, that's a great question from somebody who got a master's degree in that. For someone who got a master's degree in that. So why did I do that? Why did I pursue higher studies, advanced studies in the field of religion? You know, for me, it's a field of inquiry. So there's multiple pieces to it. One, it's a field of inquiry. Like any field of inquiry, it's seeking to move us in deeper and deeper ways in that field, right? So science or medicine, it's helping us move deeper into that inquiry of what does it mean to have a physical body, for example. This is a field of inquiry that deals with heart, spirit, essence, like all the inside-y stuff that is not necessarily physical, but is nonetheless real. So it's a part of the movement, the field of inquiry, to kind of go deeper and deeper into that. Like, what is that all about? And then, therefore, answer important questions. And so one of the things, if you actually do pursue religion, advanced studies in religion, one of the things you're told early is that every religion has the answer to. There's one question that every religion answers, every last one. What happens when we die? And there may be different answers, but they all answer that. But guess what? There's no way to answer that question without also answering what's the purpose of living. So that tells you something about the inner impulse, the inner wonderings that are intrinsic to our species, which is like, we know we have finite time. On a certain level, it freaks us out. We know we're going to die. The time ends. But if it's going to end, then what are we living for? What's the point of living, right? It's beautiful. It actually, one question leads, like, it's a full circle. It leads you back to, like, an even deeper, more important question. That's the original question. That actually should be the starting point. What's the point of being human? This is what this field helps us with. And there's different answers. The answers are widely divergent. I can attest, as somebody who grew up fairly conservative Hindu, the answers are wildly different depending on where we wind up. I think that speaks to that question. This is good. How can someone start building spiritual practices from, if you don't have one, like if there's no starting point for such in your life? That's a really good question. So the first part of that is needing to kind of understand that there isn't one thing that's a spiritual practice. Of course, there are spiritual practices that are like, you could say, the bigger ones that we hear about, that are most often we think of when we think of spiritual practice. In many denominations, including ours, a practice of prayer can be considered a spiritual practice. Meditative practices, often drawing on Buddhist and other traditions, those can be spiritual practices of mindfulness. Okay, so they're the things where we probably associate as being spiritual practices. But that's not it. That's not all that exists. And that's where I think I've learned over time that our ability to creatively step into the notion of a spiritual practice is often limited by what we think, by the cultural reference points of what we think a spiritual practice needs to be. Now here's where actually our friends in Zen Buddhism can be really helpful, because these are the folks that in the tradition who've written things like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance or Zen and the Art of Cooking. And what those authors in those traditions are trying to lift up is like literally anything can be a spiritual practice. So including motorcycle maintenance, including cooking. So what distinguishes a spiritual practice as opposed to just regular day-to-day time? You have to pay attention to the quality of your what's happening here, the quality of your inside dialogue, and the quality of here. And then the quality of here. What I mean here is connectivity. Connectivity, which for me is very tangible. I can feel it. It's a very tangible thing for me. But on the here part, Most human beings spend most of our days, we have an inner monologue that is fairly perseverating. We'll perseverate about things we're worried about, or upcoming things we're worried about, or a meeting we just had, or an encounter we just had that we're worried about. Or to-do lists of things I have to practically get done and navigate in my life. It's a fairly nonstop monologue. That's not a spiritual practice. Just being in the flow of that monologue is not a spiritual practice. It's maybe existing, it's maybe getting through the day, but it's not what we mean by a spiritual practice. So often what's happening here when we're in those wrapped up dialogues that they're on a loop, they just keep going. There's other things that happen. We often are not paying attention to our bodies as much, and we're not paying as much attention to our inner movements, which can be emotional and spiritual movements and energies. So spiritual practices, if they're good, if they're really effective, they're hopefully helping get us to a more integrated place where head, heart, body are a bit more in sync. One is not dominating, but they're equally important, and we're finding our way to that. When we find our way to that, this part calms down. It's slower. It's less afraid. It's less worried. It's less looking for the next problem on the horizon. It's more present. And when we can get to that, we hear our inside, our heart, soul, spirit, essence. We hear it more clearly. We can also pay attention to the signals in our body. I forgot lunch, or I'm late for lunch. My body's clearly telling me that. Maybe I would be less worried and anxious if I had a meal. But we can get to all of that, right? The equal care of all three: emotional, spiritual, body, cognitive, mental. Equal care of all three spiritual practices are a pathway to helping us with that. And a spiritual practice can be anything. So here's where you get to experiment. Sure, it could be a prayer practice, it could be meditation, it could be journaling, it could be contemplative walking out in nature. Those are common things. And it could be something very uncommon. Maybe tending to an ant farm could be a spiritual practice if you wanted it to be. I'm sure it could be, actually, if you brought present mind to it, if you brought care and love to it, if it grounded you, if it worked for you. So here's the thing. We're built as different as there are billions of people on this planet. No two of us are exactly alike. And therefore, energy, spirit, finding our way to that deeper inner ground is different for each of us, just as it logically would be, given how different each of us is. So it's an experimental process. You have to play around a little bit and take it as creativity. Mindfulness meditation didn't work. It just wasn't clicking for me. Well, I tried journaling. It's not bad, but I'm not really finding a way to deeper peace through that. Keep experimenting. Keep trying stuff. Be playful about it. It's an opportunity to just play and try stuff out. Try art. That's been my calling in recent days. I guess I got these messages, as many of us do when we're younger, that you're not artistic, you can't sing, you can't dance, whatever, all this stuff. I want to try creative stuff at this stage of my life. And I'm finding that as I give myself over to that, there's a centering, there's a connectivity of heart, mind, inner essence, spirit, all of that. The creativity does that for me. So play around, try stuff out. When you come onto something that works, do more of that. Stick with it. Do more of that. Now here's the next thing. Like going to the doctor at times, it can feel like a chore. It can still be good for you, even if it can feel like a chore. And the thing is, it's called a practice because if we don't do it, we don't find some regular way to do it. And if you've been tapping into like recent sermons I've offered in earlier weeks, like even 5-minute ways to do this. A spiritual practice does not have to be an hour long. It can be as short as 5 minutes if you find the right thing, if you find the thing that really resonates with you, that'll really center you and ground you. And when you can't do it, start and make it regular, because actually when we need it when things are hard. And we're not going to do a spiritual practice when it's hard if we haven't already had the practice of doing it all along. What happens is when the challenging things shows up, we go straight to perseverating. There's no room for any spiritual practice at that point in time. So the point of the practice is we figure out what works for us and we're consistently doing it so that when things are hard, we can remember, there's more to life than the difficulty. I connect with nature, I connect with music, I connect with art, I connect with my inside life through mindfulness. It reminds us we're already on a path, a routine that will help us when things are hard. Great question, thank you. And you weren't alone in that. Other people have been wondering stuff like that too, like what does it mean to step into a spiritual practice? Oh, wow. What is my spiritual purpose? Okay, you know what, there's a beauty to this. This happened in the first service too. Okay, so if you're doing the thing I just talked about, the thing that's helping us to greater stillness and being able to hear ourselves, which includes hearing our body, which includes hearing inner wisdom, not just the active mind that obsesses about stuff. If we get to that space and can consistently be in that kind of relationship with our own inner wisdom, you will know. Now take this, the irony of this is I am somebody who has probably obsessed about this question for most of my adult life. Like, what is my spiritual purpose? Am I in the right place? Am I with the right people? Am I doing the right thing? Like, should I be doing something different with a different people, different community, different way? I've literally obsessed about this question most of my adult life. And for me, where I've wound up is like, it's actually an unfolding for me. There isn't one answer. And so being present to that deeper sense of self, which comes out of practice, allows us to be present to the unfolding answers as they unfold. I can trust that, yes, today I'm in the right place with the right people. The work's different today. Believe me, it's different today than it was pre-pandemic. Night and day different. And that's okay. It's okay that it's different. That's what I'm called to do and be right now, and how I'm called to show up, right? So finding our way to that inner ground of being helps us be present to the unfolding. Spiritual purpose is not static, it's an unfolding. It evolves and changes. So listen. And nobody can help you with this too, unfortunately. Only you can come up with the answer that you're looking for. There's a beauty to that too, though. It makes it fun. It can be fun. Let it be fun. Yeah, less serious. Let it be playful and fun. Can be fun. Okay, last one-ish. How do I share hope with my, oh gosh, this is important. How do I share hope with my kids when the pandemic makes any plan or dream unstable? My 8.5-year-old is sad that we can't count on, specific activities and things that we want to be able to do. Yeah, that's real. I feel that too. Clearly, I feel that as a parent of a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. That's been very hard, kind of being present to that and witnessing that for those of us who are parents or grandparents or connected to little ones right now. Seeing the losses that our kids have had to navigate, even as we're trying to understand and navigate and make sense of out of our own adult losses, to see the kids struggling and grieving has been really hard, very painful. And I know that. I feel that too. So what does hope and possibility look like in the middle of that? I've also given up trying to figure out when the pandemic is going to end. I caught myself a week or two ago. I was like, well, the curve is just starting to turn on Omicron. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is now the end point of the virus and it'll settle down. And who knows? We're 2 years into this. Like the moment I should know better than to even let my mind think that at this point in time. I just don't know. Maybe none of this is changing for a while still. It's not what I want, but that seems to be the proven trajectory so far. So given that, what does hope and possibility look like? I'd say, so what has the pandemic taught us? It's taught us to notice smaller things and go local, go smaller, and really relish those things, right? So what do I mean by, hopefully you know what I mean by that, because I feel like it's a collective thing we've been figuring out and learning. Our lives narrowed, right? And initially it was just like to our house in those days of lockdown. And there was an initial joy of that. Great, more time at home. Wow, I never spent this much time at home. This is great. More time with kids. Great, 6 months in, more time with everybody that I've been seeing nonstop for 6 months now. And there's still a joy in that, in the way things have narrowed down a little bit. It can be joyful just to have a simple meal together that's well cooked. It can be joyful to play a game together. It can be joyful to do an art project together. It can be joyful to go on a walk together. Yeah, I don't know how many nature walks my family and I did prior to the pandemic. Probably not that many. I mean, when we were intentionally going on like a hiking trip or vacation. But like now, occasionally there's nature walks. And sometimes the kids ask for it. They want to go on a nature walk. You know, there's a beauty to that. There's a simplicity and a beauty to that. So I think hope and possibility have and probably do reside right now in simple things that we forget to view as beautiful. And certainly pre-pandemic, we didn't necessarily consider these high points. Oh yeah, I'm going on a nature walk. That's the high point of my whole week. We wouldn't have thought that pre-pandemic necessarily. And during this time, it has at times been that, hasn't it? That's right, actually. That's actually appropriate. Those little things that we would dismiss as not being important, they always were. And in fact, if we can't find some sense of contentment, some sense of beauty, some sense of joy in those things, the only things that will suffice in the absence of that are really, really big, grand things. And really, really big, grand things are few and far between. The day-to-day joys are better. Notice them, relish them. Invite appreciation in your family, in your relationship with your friends, with your kids, grandkids. Invite the noticing of it. That is possible. It's always been possible. And in fact, it's a stepping stone to greater contentment. There's no larger contentment without this piece. So with that, I want to thank you all for some beautiful questions this morning. Please know that I read every last one that you all submit, and it's always a privilege to do so, and you will no doubt find themes emerging in future services where we start to integrate other questions that have come up. Thank you so much for participating in this. It's a joy to be on this journey together with you. Thank you, Allison. Rise as you're able, comfortably able. Take a minute just to look around this lovely sanctuary, your companions on this journey, those that are physically here with us, those of you that are joining us from home, either live streaming now or watching later, you're in our hearts as well. As we enter this new week, go forth knowing that you belong to a community that relishes this asking of important questions. Who are we? What is the purpose of being human? What are we trying to do and achieve while we have this brief time and this embodiment on this planet together? These are important, valuable, and good questions, and you belong to a community that is as deeply invested in trying to find the best answers, really good answers, make a positive impact in the wider world around us. That's the people that you are a part of, that are cheering you on as you seek to deepen your own journey. Go now knowing that you are held in love, held in the hope and prayer of peace and grace until we meet again. May it be so. Amen.